If just one frantic morning could erase 250 planes and 2,500 elite crewmen from an empire's order of battle, what verdict would history deliver? At 10:22 a.m. on June 4, 1942, flames devoured 3 Japanese carriers in 5 shattering minutes, swallowing aircraft wing to wing and sailors in infernos of their own making. By nightfall, a 4th joined them at the ocean floor. Tokyo's invincible armada had vanished overnight. Days earlier, the rising sun flew unchallenged from Singapore to the Solomons. Victory seemed eternal, yet in a dim Pearl Harbor basement, pencils and codebooks turned arrogance into annihilation. This is the story of Midway, where victory disease met its reckoning, and minutes of hubris cost Japan an irreplaceable generation. Clarity, courage, and cold intelligence rewrote the Pacific War in a single day. In the spring of 1942, the Empire of Japan stood astride the Pacific like a colossus unchallenged. 6 months after Pearl Harbor, its conquests stretched from the coral atolls of Wake Island to the oil fields of the Dutch East Indies. Singapore had fallen in 70 days. The Philippines lay prostrate. Burma's jungles echoed with retreating British footsteps. Newspapers in Tokyo proclaimed a divine mandate, while admirals plotted the final strokes of dominance. Japan commanded 4 fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, each a floating fortress bristling with 248 aircraft, supported by battleships, cruisers, and swarms of destroyers. The numbers told a tale of overwhelming might. Over 200 planes poised to strike, crews honed by years of grueling drills. Yet, beneath the triumphs, lurked a strategic imperative born of vulnerability. Japan's empire was a fragile perimeter, an archipelago of islands demanding constant defense across vast oceans. Midway Atoll, that insignificant coral speck, 1,300 miles northwest of Hawaii, guarded the approaches to the homeland. Seizing it would lure the battered American fleet into a decisive battle, a Mahanian clash where superior numbers and skill would crush the enemy in one cataclysmic blow. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of Pearl Harbor and student of Western ways, drove the plan forward despite private doubts. He knew America's factories could outproduce Japan tenfold, churning carriers from assembly lines like Detroit's spewed automobiles. "I can run wild for 6 months," he had warned, "but after that, I have no expectation of success." By May 1942, those 6 months had elapsed. Still, the High Command pressed on, seduced by momentum. The gamble was audacious. Operation MI divided Yamamoto's forces. Nagumo's First Air Fleet, with its 4 carriers, would strike Midway, soften defenses for invasion, then pivot to ambush Nimitz's remnants, Enterprise and Hornet, with Yorktown presumed crippled from Coral Sea. Battleships trailed as hammer to the carrier's anvil. On paper, perfection. Japan held every advantage in tonnage, experience, and reach. But doctrine demanded a knockout punch, ignoring the tyranny of fuel ranges, scouting gaps, and the enemy's unseen resilience. Victory disease whispered that Americans lacked the will for prolonged war, a fatal miscalculation. Midway was no mere raid. It was the pivot on which empire turned, a bid to force peace before America's industrial colossus awoke. The stage was set, the trap sprung in Tokyo's mind. What Japan could not see was that the Americans had already read the script. Within the marbled halls of Japan's naval general staff, euphoria reigned supreme. Coral Sea had been a tactical draw, but in Tokyo's calculus it confirmed American frailty, Yorktown limping away, presumed out for months. Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, victor of Pearl Harbor and the Indian Ocean raids, brimmed with confidence. His carriers, fresh from triumphs, carried pilots who were not mere airmen but samurai of the sky, veterans of 1,000 sorties. Why doubt now? The Empire's banner flew over half the Pacific. Doubters were sidelined as defeatists. This intoxicating brew was victory disease, the arrogance of unbroken success, where momentum masqueraded as destiny and caution became cowardice. Admiral Yamamoto embodied the tension. Educated at Harvard, attuned to America's potential, he orchestrated Midway as his masterpiece, a layered trap with Nagumo's carriers as bait, battleships lurking 300 miles astern, submarines forming a picket line. The plan gleamed on charts, scouts fanning out at dawn, strikes sequenced to perfection, reserves armed for whatever foe appeared. Yet cracks marred the elegance. Forces split across 700 miles, strained communications and fuel logistics. Scouts launched too late, their float planes plagued by catapult failures and fogged windscreens. Japanese doctrine prized offensive spirit over reconnaissance, assuming enemy weakness obviated thorough search. Nagumo, methodical but rigid, trusted his cap of zero fighters to ward off threats, blind to the rearming cycles that demanded pristine decks. Hubris deepened the peril. Operations Chief Mitsuo Fuchida, Pearl Harbor's strike leader, dismissed American resolve. They lack the national characteristics for a long, drawn-out war. Pressure mounted from Emperor's advisors, craving a negotiated peace. Yamamoto overruled skeptics, fragmenting his fleet to feint at the Aleutians, a diversion diluting strength. The blueprint was intricate, beautiful in abstraction, but brittle against chaos. No contingency for intel failure, no margin for mechanical delays. Victory disease blinded them to the rearming dilemma. Switching bombs mid-battle would crowd decks with fueled planes and explosives. As Nagumo's armada steamed toward Midway, overconfidence reigned. The Colossus advanced, certain of the kill, unaware that its own momentum carried it toward abyss. That was the hidden cost of hubris. Plans too perfect for the fog of war. While Japanese carriers sliced through the Pacific swells, a shadow war unfolded in a windowless basement beneath Pearl Harbor's hills. Station Hypo, a ragtag team of cryptanalysts led by Commander Joseph Rochefort, sifted mountains of intercepted chatter. No glamour here, just stubby pencils, perforated codebooks, and endless strips of JN-25 messages, Japan's naval cipher deemed unbreakable. By early May, fragments coalesced, a massive operation targeting AF. Was it Hawaii? The West Coast? Rochefort wagered Midway. To prove it, he orchestrated a masterstroke open radio orders for Midway to signal a fresh water shortage. Days later, Japanese scouts dutifully reported, AF is short of water. The veil tore. AF was Midway. Nimitz had his target, dates, and order of battle. This intelligence triumph stemmed from methodical persistence. Hypo had partially cracked JN 25 months earlier, recovering 10-20% of daily traffic through depth charging, exploiting sloppy Japanese habits like reusing additives. Rochefort's team burned through nights, cross-referencing call signs. Kido Butai, Nagumo's carrier force, poised for action. Scouting gaps emerged too. Japanese float planes from cruisers Issei and Chikuma launched late, hampered by overcast skies and engine woes, spotting nothing until perilously close. American PBY Catalinas, meanwhile, prowled ahead, their radarless patrols guided by hunch and endurance. One sighted Nagumo's screen at dawn June 4th, relaying position despite garbled signals. Why did Japan falter? Over-reliance on radio silence bred complacency. Doctrine favored attack over eyes in the sky. Rochefort's aha fused scraps into a trap, shifting America from prey to predator. Nimitz acted with steel resolve. Dismissing Washington skeptics, he dispatched Enterprise, Hornet, and a miraculously repaired Yorktown rebuilt in 72 hours to Point Luck, a patch of ocean northeast of Midway. Submarines Nautilus and Narwhal seeded the path with ambushes. For the first time since December 7th, the U.S. Navy would strike first, informed by secrets snatched from ether. Japan's scouts groped blindly. America's codebreakers had illuminated the board. The hidden war tipped the scales. Intel not just warned, but weaponized. As dawn broke on June 4th, Nagumo turned into the wind, oblivious that his empire's fate hung on decrypted whispers. Admiral Chester Nimitz stared at the chart in Pearl Harbor's dim glow, the weight of empire on his shoulders. Intelligence painted the picture, Nagumo's 4 carriers barreling toward Midway, battleships trailing like hounds. Nimitz's hand hovered over 3 fragile assets, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, her hull still scarred from Coral Sea but patched by round-the-clock welders. No reinforcements loomed. America's yards berthed flat-tops slowly. Yet he committed them all to Point Luck, a nebulous square 200 miles northeast of the atoll, shrouded in weather that masked radars and eyes alike. Submarines, Tambor and Trout, lay submerged on approach lanes, their torpedoes hungry. It was a gambler's throw, hold back and lose Midway's outpost, or stake everything on ambush. Spruance and Fletcher, aboard Enterprise and Yorktown, orchestrated the quiet build-up. Dive bombers and Wildcats warmed on decks slick with Pacific spray. Torpedo planes, obsolete devastators, nested below, their crews stealing for suicide runs. Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher coordinated from Yorktown, deferring air ops to Ray Spruance's steady calculus. Doctrine bent here no rash counterstrike, but calculated weight, trusting PBY patrols to herald the foe. The gamble pierced Nimitz's prudence. Fuel margins razor-thin, no land bases for respite. Why risk it? Because intel granted asymmetry, Nagumo hunted phantoms while Americans lay in wait, decks clear, bombs fused for carriers. Japanese scouting arcs faltered, their floatplanes tardy. U.S. Catalinas bridged the gap, one lumbering back with smoke trails confirming the prize at 0:45 a.m. June 4th. Midnight tensions gripped cockpits, the acrid tang of avgas, the creak of straining hulls. Marines on Midway hunkered amid sandbagged batteries, their Brewster Buffaloes outmatched but defiant. Nimitz's trap snapped shut invisibly. Nagumo's 108-plane Alpha strike roared off at 0:430, bound to pulverize runways, leaving reserves below decks in flux. America, the underdog forged in Pearl's ashes, reversed roles. The Colossus steamed into the maw, its prey now the hunter. Victory disease met vigilance. The Pacific held its breath as fortunes converged. Dawn's first light bathed Nagumo's carriers in deceptive calm as 108 aircraft thundered skyward from Akagi and comrades, bound for Midway's throat. At 0630, bombs cratered runways and ignited fuel dumps, but the atoll endured. Marine gunners barked defiance, obsolete wildcats clawing futilely upward. The Alpha strike leader's voice crackled back. Midway heavily damaged, but requires further attack. Nagumo faced the fork. His reserves, 40 torpedo-laden Kates and dive bombers, stood primed for ships if spotted. Yet doctrine demanded Midway's airfield die before invasion. At 0715, he relented. Prepare second strike. Below decks erupted in frenzy, torpedoes yanked below. 550-pound land bombs hauled aloft on screeching carts, fueled Zeros circling desperately low on fumes. Hangars reeked of gasoline vapors, elevators jammed midway, decks a tinderbox of high explosives. Chaos deepened at 0810. A tardy scout from cruiser Chikuma, airborne since 0500 but crippled by fogged lenses, finally pierced the haze. Enemy carriers sighted. Nagumo's bridge froze. Countermand, the rearming haul torpedoes back up, consign land bombs to the depths. Crews reversed the frenzy, sweat-soaked amid snaking hoses and teetering ordnance. Why this paralysis? Rigid doctrine prized clean recoveries over flexibility, no drills for mid-switch. Fuel constraints bit returning planes dumped loads into seas, cap scattered low. Nagumo hesitated, querying Yamamoto 200 miles astern, burning precious minutes. The rearming dilemma, foreseen by no one in hubris's grip, transformed pristine carriers into floating arsenals. Scouts' late reports delayed by mechanical woes and optimistic filters compounded the bind. By 0920, decks brimmed perilously. Fueled aircraft jostled bombs on trolleys, sparks a whisper from inferno. Combat air patrol dwindled, Zeros lured seaward by false alarms. Time hemorrhaged, each reversed order frayed discipline, each circling pilot a countdown. Nagumo paced Akagi's bridge, the ocean deceptively serene. Unaware torpedoes approached. Victory disease had scripted precision. Reality delivered pandemonium. The trap Nagumo set for others clamped on his throat. Minutes ticked toward doom, the Colossus adrift in its own disorder. At 0920, the first American arrows loosed Torpedo Squadron 8 from Hornet, led by Lieutenant Commander John Waldron. 15 fragile devastators droned low over azure swells, angling for Nagumo's heart. Waldron's final words to his men echoed, "If only one plane survives, it must attack." Zeros pounced like falcons, cannons shredding wings. Devastators cartwheeled into froth or ballooned into fireballs. All plunged seaward, Waldron's craft a final pyre. Ensign George Gay alone bobbed amid wreckage, witness to sacrifice. From Japanese bridges, triumph, the reckless foe shattered. Yet those doomed runs dragged cap to sea level, burned zero fuel, scattered guardians skyward in pursuit. Carriers duked wildly from phantom wakes, exposing vitals above. Enterprise's Torpedo 6 and Yorktowns followed, sharing the Holocaust more devastators riddled, crews perishing in boiling seas. 90 seconds of low assault yielded no hits, but unlocked the vault. High overhead, Commander Wade McCluskey pondered in his Dauntless. Fuel critical, no targets. A lone destroyer knifing full tilt decided him follow the arrow. At 1019, haze parted. 4 carriers arrayed below, decks cluttered with rearming planes, bombs strewn like invitations. "Roll in!" McCluskey roared. 37 SBDs thundered over, sirens wailing apocalypse. Kaga struck first. 3 500-pounders pierced her hangar, igniting fueled zeros in chain reaction hellfire. 18 aircraft vaporized, crews incinerated mid-task. Seconds later, Akagi shuddered under a hammer blow, 1 bomb amidships, sparking secondary blasts that ripped her vitals. Elevators fused, inferno racing through bomb magazines. Soryu followed, forward hangar a blossom of orange death, her air group pride of Pearl Harbor engulfed. 5 minutes, 10:20 to 10:25. 3 Titans mortally wounded, over 200 planes and 2,000 souls consigned to depths in roiling pyres. Sailors leaped into oil-slicked flames, hulls listing under hammer blows. Why the slaughter? Rearming left them naked decks as powder kegs, cap absent. Torpedo gambles bought the window. Intel placed the knife. Hiryu alone survived. Rear Admiral Tamon Yamaguchi, launching desperate riposte dive bombers, gutting Yorktown at noon, torpedoes flooding her later. Yet Enterprise's Avengers returned. Bombs caved Hiryu's deck, flames claiming her air group by dusk. 4 carriers gone, 250 aircraft and 2,500 crewmen erased overnight. The turning point crashed home, hubris shattered by precision. As twilight bled across the Pacific on June 4th, Nagumo's fleet dissolved into retreat. Akagi listed inert, her bridge a tomb. Kaga and Soryu wallowed in smoke-shrouded agony before bulkheads failed. Hiryu, gallant to the last, succumbed to unchecked blazes by midnight, Yamaguchi choosing death with his ship. 4 carriers, backbone of Japan's naval aviation, slid beneath waves, carrying 248 aircraft and roughly 2,500 crewmen, the toll mounting with drowned pilots and trapped mechanics. Over 300 planes total vaporized in hangars or ditched for lack of decks. Elite aircrews, product of decade-long attrition training, perished en masse. Yamamoto, witnessing via scout plane, rasped orders to withdraw, his decisive battle a rout. The hemorrhage transcended steel. Japan's pilot pipeline, rigorous selection, years of carrier quals could not replenish such loss. Pre-war, 35,000 aspirants yielded 500 aces. Midway erased a generation, forcing rookies aloft months later. America mourned Yorktown, scuttled June 7th after Hiryu's stings, plus 150 planes and 307 souls grievous, yet eclipsed by factories spewing Essex-class giants monthly. Rearmament's chaos amplified doom. Cluttered decks turned strikes into self-immolation. Doctrine's rigidity sealing fate. Strategic dominoes toppled, Aleutian's feint abandoned, perimeter exposed. Nimitz pursued cautiously, subs claiming cruiser Mikuma. Japan limped home, initiative forfeited. Overnight, Midway inverted the war. Tokyo masked defeat as pre-planned, but admirals knew. Irreplaceable expertise drowned, not rebuildable. Victory Disease's bill arrived, hubris cashed in lives and legacy. The Pacific tide turned inexorably. Midway's embers faded, but its shockwaves reshaped the Pacific. Japan, stripped of offensive thrust, hunkered into defense. Guadalcanal's jungles became attrition's crucible 2 months hence, where pilot famine bit deep. By 1944's Marianas Turkey Shoot, green recruits fed zeros into American Hellcats. Leyte Gulf sealed the hemorrhage. What began as Empire's zenith ended in concession's shadow. 4 carriers lost in hours, yet the true catastrophe was human. 2,500 crewmen and a cadre of irreplaceable aviators, their training pipeline shattered beyond repair. 3 eternal lessons endure. First, victory disease blinds even Titan's hubris, mistook momentum for mastery, ignoring Intel's edge. Second, carrier warfare hinges on minutes. Rearming's fatal pause exposed doctrine's frailty against agile foes. Third, systems prevail over steel. America's factories and codebreakers outpaced Japan's artisan pilots. Intel beat armor, sacrifice forged victory. Midway whispers across decades. Empires crumble not in grand clashes, but in overlooked minutes, where arrogance meets awakened resolve. A single night's inferno consigned hubris to history's depths.